am thrilled to be here with two friends that I admire greatly, active and committed philanthropists and really leaders in the next wave. We're here to talk about the future of philanthropy, but I want to start in the past. Priscilla, we were talking backstage about your first memory and the impact that your childhood had on your journey, that it really led you to where you are today. Tell us a little bit about your childhood.
At the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, we're working on advancing human potential and promoting equal opportunity, and that is incredibly important and personal for me. I am the child of Chinese Vietnamese refugees who came to this country with so little, and they really believed in the power of education and being able to bring my sisters and I a better opportunity. And early on, I just remember, like, as a family, we worked hard, and I felt an obligation to care for my grandparents, my sisters. My first memory is actually caring for my grandparents when my sister was at the hospital. And that sense of duty and caring, combined with the empowerment that my teachers and mentors gave me growing up, carried me all the way to Harvard, where I realized I was in a place of seemingly unlimited opportunity. And that was because I got lucky. I got lucky because people invested in me, and I needed to make sure that I worked hard to make sure that others, there's so many families and children that have incredible potential but don't get lucky. And what we're trying to do at the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative is invest in science and education to take the luck out of these systems and make sure that everyone has what they need to survive, thrive, and live to their fullest potential.
And you very purposefully knew that it might be in health. You are a pediatrician, and your day job actually is being a primary care physician for families at the county hospital.
Yes.
Did you always know that you were going to be a doctor? Because we joked that as immigrants, sometimes we used to hear our parents say, we left our homeland so you could pursue your dreams as long as you're a lawyer, a doctor, or an engineer. And I didn't do it, and she did. So I know they're very proud of you.
I've always known that I wanted to work with children and invest in children because they just have so much potential, and I'm where I am today is because people invested in me. And so I ran an after-school program in college where I worked with a lot of kids living in a low-income housing project, and like, we were supposed to help them with their homework, but really we did whatever we needed to help those kids thrive. And I saw firsthand how complicated it can be for kids to really get to the classroom and learn. I had a child in my program where one day after school I found her playing, and after having missed program, and her two front teeth were broken. And I had so many questions in that moment, like, who hurt her? How did this happen? Has she got medical care? And I realized what I really needed to do was expand my toolkit and being able to really advocate for the lives of children. And in that moment, I decided to go to medical school, and ultimately now I'm lucky enough to be able to work on many systems that are important for children, including science, healthcare, and education.
It's terrific. Darren, fellow Texan, born in Lafayette, Louisiana, raised by a single mom who took you to Ames, Texas. And seminal story that is extraordinary is you say that one of the greatest things that happened was a Head Start recruiter knocked on the door and your mom enrolled you in that program, which not only was transformative for you, but little would you know then that you would run the foundation that started Head Start one day. Tell us about that
really
extraordinary
true.
story.
In 1965, in a little dirt road, a woman approached a little shotgun house in Ames, Texas, population 1,400. And my mother and I were sitting on the porch, and she told my mother about a new government program called Head Start. And I was enrolled in Head Start, and in many ways it gave me my start in life. And certainly my thirst for knowledge and my curiosity was emboldened by that experience. And I'm forever grateful. And like Priscilla, I think I too have been inspired by those who have invested in me, and understanding how systems produce privilege for some in this country and produce disadvantage for others is a part of what we're doing at the Ford Foundation. But I'm hopeful, and I like to say that we're in the business of hope at the Ford Foundation. At the end of the day, we've got to have a sense of hope and possibility.
And that's why you actually transformed the mission of the Ford Foundation, which is very difficult to do for such a large organization with a lot of history. You set out and got your team to really follow you around global inequality. Why that specific focus area?
Well, because inequality is the one trend, along with climate change, that is having a powerful impact on the world, and in many ways is harmful. And certainly in the United States, we see the effects of inequality in the breakdown of social cohesion, the increase of cynicism, and attempts to delegitimize institutions. And in many ways, getting back to what I said about hope, the real challenge that this country faces is not terrorism. It's not a plague. Those things do exist. The greatest threat to our civilization is hopelessness, because hopelessness creates the kinds of distortions that we are seeing in our political system today, where people feel they have nothing to lose and make irrational choices about leaders. And so we have to take on this question of inequality, because the only way our systems are going to work better, our systems, our economy, our systems of governance, our systems of education, is if we recognize that we've got to do more to reduce inequality.
You and I have always talked about how you felt, as Priscilla said, that people were rooting for you, that even though you had a lot of barriers in Texas, you just felt like people were investing in you, and that today you're not sure if those systems would be in place, that if there's a boy in Texas right now that was in the same situation, there's real question about whether they would be the next Darren Walker.
No, absolutely, because when you look, I'm a product of public schools. I had access to a great public education at a low cost. The Texas legislature has moved away from underwriting the cost of its public universities and put more of the burden on the students and their families, because it's important to keep taxes down. And some of the very people leading the mantra of reduce taxes themselves have been the beneficiary of those systems. And so I'm often frustrated by many of these people who declare themselves to be self-made. They're not self-made. They worked hard, they were disciplined, but there was an ecosystem that supported their ultimate success. And that ecosystem was an education system, a transportation system, all of those systems that make it possible for us to have a foundation for success in this country. And we have to recognize that many of those systems are public systems and must have public investment if they're to sustain our aspirations as a nation.
And increasingly, those public investments are being met by private investments in the work of private foundations. Priscilla, you and Mark made an extraordinary announcement that 99% of your shares in Facebook will fund the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative. And first of all, congratulations. It's an amazing thing.
Thank you.
And thank you. But tell us a little bit about the thinking around that, because I know that you wanted to start early so that you could learn and, frankly, adapt along the way. And tell us the main focus areas.
Yeah. So what Mark and I realized that we had an incredible opportunity to really make an impact on this goals of advancing human potential and promoting equal opportunity. But we needed to bring more than just our resources to the table. What would make our work have the greatest impact is bringing our expertise and passion to this work as well. And so for Mark, that means being an engineer and building tools. And so that's something very core to what we do. We believe in building useful tools for people out doing the hard work in order to allow our teachers or scientists to do even better and more impactful work. And what I bring is the lens of an educator and as a pediatrician to make sure that those tools aren't built in isolation. We are really thinking about how a teacher really interfaces with the tool, how a student understands the tool, how does a family see the value and be able to learn along with the child if we're building an educational tool. And so that really brings, along with partners, my perspective shapes how that tool really gets leveraged in the real world. And so that's what we bring to the table, but we know that we have so much more to learn. And it's important to us in order to make progress in two areas that we've invested in so far: education, where we're hoping that children and students can learn 100 times what they can now today through personalized learning, and science, where we're hoping to cure all disease by the end of the century. Those are huge goals, and we need to make long-term investments, investing in making bets that will take 25, 50, 100 years to pan out, but doing that now, because 100 years is a long time, but if we start the clock now, we can actually make real progress. And along the way, with every investment, we need to understand what are the milestones we're working towards. What does it mean to actually succeed? What does it mean to fail and to learn from those failures so that our work can be even more impactful as we continue on this journey?
And very specifically, the focus on disease. Tell us a little bit about how you think where some of the initial grants of the $3 billion investment you recently made might go.
Yeah, so for our science strategy, curing all diseases is a huge endeavor that we don't think that we're able to do alone. And so our strategy is actually to build tools to meet the needs of scientists today. And we spent 2 years talking to scientists ranging from postdocs to Nobel Prize laureates. And what we heard was that they don't have the tools that we experience every day from just our phone to actually leverage the work that they do as scientists to be able to ask more creative questions, to find solutions that really impact human health. And that fit really well with us, because like I said, it was important to us to find a way to contribute that really built on our strengths. And so our hope is to actually be able to build and co-develop those tools to help scientists everywhere. In our first two projects through the Chan Zuckerberg BioHub in particular will be to contribute to the international movement on building the cell atlas, really understanding every cell and its function, and also our work through infectious disease, both understanding and preventing. And so it's a combination of really our world-class engineering team, which we just hired a CTO to build, Brian Pinkerton, and being able to build those tools in-house, but really listening to and responding to the needs of scientists everywhere.
So Darren, do you listen to this and think, wow, imagine having a blank slate, you pick a focus area, innovation, technology, because your two organizations could not be more different, right? Ford Foundation, founded in 1936, offices all around the world. I would imagine there's a little bit of bureaucracy there. Priscilla is describing a whole new and innovative way to think about it. What are some things that you've learned from each other?
Well, first, I think that I have huge admiration for Mark and Priscilla, and we in some ways have been on this journey in conversations as they've really crafted what I think is probably the most exciting new strategy by one of the preeminent young philanthropists. And I think what we can learn, the legacy foundations, is the power of being agile and nimble and making innovation and discovery at the forefront of what we do. I think what we would bring in terms of an understanding of 80 years working on many of these significant social challenges is that science matters, that technology matters, but culture matters. Mm-hmm. And one of the reasons we have not been able to make more progress, certainly in the United States and in other parts of the world, is because of cultural narratives and cultural constructs. For example, the racial hierarchy that we have, that has existed in the United States for 3 centuries. That hierarchy, that history, is an envelope within which we try to fix our public schools, for example, or we try to reduce mass incarceration. We really won't solve those problems without understanding the very difficult and uncomfortable truths about the contradictions of our country and the contradictions of philanthropy, because we exist in some ways because of inequality. And so it's the contradiction of how we reconcile that reality with our aspiration that there be less inequality and less poverty and less injustice in this country. So from my standpoint, when I come out here, I always leave energized. I had dinner with Priscilla last week, and I left and I felt like the world's going to be okay.
But does your staff say, oh no, he's coming back with tons of new big ideas?
Well, I think you know, one of the real challenges of running a legacy, and people in media, any legacy, is that you've got history, and with history comes baggage. And that baggage of, well, we've seen that before, or well, that's not a new idea, or we did that in 1955. You hear that sort of thing a lot. And those are the symptoms of the smugness, the arrogance that comes with having done well over many years. And so whether it's IBM or the Ford Foundation, we have to be mindful of what happens to you over those years of calcification of culture and the kind of just arrogance that we've got to militate against.
And I'm going to open it up to questions here, but Priscilla, what would you say you would learn, you know, from Darren? And I know he's been a great friend as you've built out this initiative.
Yeah, we have so much to learn from Darren, the Ford Foundation, and others who've been on this journey, because there isn't one silver bullet that's going to fix all of this. And what we bring is an ability to build tools, but tools are only as useful as their ability to solve and really be a good fit for a problem. And what we get from working with all those that have paved the way before us is the context. Like, what is the problem? How can we better understand these problems together? And how can we strategize? What has worked and what hasn't worked? And we were just talking about a problem near and dear to our hearts, and Darren has already changed the way I'm starting to think about this, but like, what can we do together, and what can I bring that's new to a problem that he understands more deeply and more profoundly than we do?
You know, I don't want to lose the criminal justice reform thread. You have really invested a great deal in this, and I think people probably know there's a major piece of legislation right now that's actually bipartisan to fundamentally reform the criminal justice system. Talk to us a little bit about that and the role the Ford Foundation is playing.
Well, I think we as a nation have recognized that the war on drugs was an abject failure. The war on drugs was created by Richard Nixon in 1972 as a political response to the two communities that he hated most, who were his political enemies as he saw them, hippies and African Americans. And the effort, as John Ehrlichman articulated very clearly when he got out of prison, was to criminalize and marginalize those two communities. And sadly, it was successful. And so we have today a system of mass incarceration with over 2.6 million people, million Americans, incarcerated, most for nonviolent crimes, and 60 million Americans in some way ensnarled in our criminal justice system through parole, minor violations, etc. So we have a problem, and the American people, I think, have realized through the work of people like Michelle Alexander, who wrote The New Jim Crow, and so many others, that we have this challenge. And of course, the great Brian Stevenson down in Montgomery, Alabama. And so we've come together with the Kochs, Freedom Works, a very
Talk about strange bedfellows.
Absolutely.
That was the earlier session.
I certainly will tell you that that grant got a lot of scrutiny at the Ford Foundation, but it was worth making because we have to not be ideological. We need to be solving the problem, and if we're going to solve the problem, it's going to take all of us.
Definitely. I have a question right over here.
Hi, my name is Deborah Cullinan, and I'm the CEO of this extraordinary organization, Yerba Buena Center for the Arts. Really very pleased to have Vanity Fair back and to have all of you here. Our mission is to generate culture that moves people. We are actually on a mission to transform the way that arts organizations of all kinds deploy their resources. And we think arts organizations are uniquely situated to drive cultural movement, to impact social change, to be part of the work that we need to do in all of these areas. So what I want to know, our theory is we're not going to do any of this work if we do not start with inspiration. If people are not inspired, if they lack the ability to think about a future that is different than what they are dealing with today, how will we make the change that we're going to make? So my question is, what role does art and creativity and inspiration play in your strategies?
I mean, the arts, we know from the way the brain works, to have empathy, we need to understand our humanity. We gain that through the arts and the humanities. If we don't have empathy in this country, we won't have justice in this country. And so in order for us to be a society of people who have empathy and the capacity to put themselves in the shoes of others, we have to understand how to learn that. And we need institutions like yours to be valued in our society and not considered an add-on or something for the rich and the privileged. We particularly, we people of color, poor people, one of the reasons when I was a kid, my grandmother was a domestic, and she would bring home for me in brown paper bags art books and shelter magazines from the people, the family she worked for. That was a transformational experience for me. It took me out of that little shotgun house to a world I could not have imagined living in, but that I could actually dream about and think that I might possibly one day be a part of. That's what the arts can do in your life. So I applaud you and thank you. And at the Ford Foundation, as you probably know, we have a significant commitment to the arts.
And obviously, in all that you're doing, Priscilla, the creativity piece, I mean, definitionally, right? You're trying to apply both engineering, but a totally new way to think of things, and that has to come with creativity.
Science and technology is a form of art and creativity. And how do you actually think creatively to solve a problem? But we also believe that storytelling is incredibly important, that we need to have ways for people to share their experiences, share their values, and really give everyone a voice and an opportunity to say what they believe in and what their hope is for the future. And so we see incredible value in that and hope to be able to support great storytelling as part of our work at CZI.
That's great. One more question, I think.
Hi, my name is Deidre Huntington. I'm actually with the Kellogg Foundation. So thank you so much for this panel. It's very exciting. One thing we're thinking a lot about is evaluation, measurements of success. We pulled this lever at this time, we maybe got this outcome, and that's really difficult to measure. So I would just love to hear your thoughts on how you're measuring success and failures for grant making and projects.
So we really believe in being able to understand the work that we're doing, and it's really hard when you set these big goals. We can't, work for 100 years and then in 100 years from now say, well, how do we do? Nobody plays a basketball game with a scoreboard covered. That's a terrible idea. So we need to start somewhere, and imperfect measures are better than no measures, as long as we understand that they are imperfect and they only give us a notion about where we're going. And we work towards those metrics that we agree upon, whether or not in our organization or in a certain field, but we also need to understand that we need to improve those measures over time, but imperfect is better than none.
I would just say that I agree with everything Priscilla said, and we're going to learn a lot from working with you around this. I would also say that sometimes we don't have to measure to know we're doing the right thing. The Ford Foundation made our first grant in South Africa in 1952 because there was a new phenomenon, a new system of apartheid. And we made grants for almost 40 years. without a real evaluation strategy, but because we believed that democracy was needed in that country. And so we made grants, and grants that were unpopular, because it's important to remember that Nelson Mandela was considered an enemy of the state at one time. So we were supporting efforts there that were very unpopular, not because we had a good evaluation system, but because it was the right thing to do for a foundation committed to justice around the world.
Well, one final sort of closing question. You probably both know that in the next 50 years, more philanthropic capital will be invested than in the prior 200 in private foundations and giving. Do you feel bullish? Do you feel positive about the trends? And do you feel that more people, and maybe people in this room, are going to get more involved, and maybe a little bit of advice if people are, especially some of the young people here, the students, if they want to get a little bit more involved? What would your advice to them be?
I'm so excited to be part of a greater movement to really make sure that we are leaving this world a better place for the next generation. And I think there's so many places where we can all work together and really make sure that we're spending our money in a way that creates lasting impact. And I think everyone can really contribute to part of this movement. And what we've learned and really appreciate is that do this work now. Like, you can make an impact if you're giving some of your resources, giving some of your time. But the important thing is to do it now so that you have the opportunity to really learn, internalize, and your benefits, they accumulate.
And I'm inspired by this new young community of philanthropists like Mark and Priscilla, who approach their work with humility, with a sense of the possibility, and with the commitment to humanity. It's hugely inspiring, and so I am bullish on the future of philanthropy.
Well, you are two hugely inspiring leaders. Thank you so much.
But don't get lucky. And what we're trying to do at the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative is invest in science and education to take the luck out of these systems and make sure that everyone has what they need to survive, thrive, and live to their fullest potential. And
you very purposefully knew that it might be in health. You are a pediatrician, and your day job actually is being a primary care physician for families at the county hospital.
Yes.
Did you always know that you were going to be a doctor? Because we joked that as immigrants, I am thrilled to be here with two friends that I admire greatly, active and committed philanthropists and really leaders in the next wave. We're here to talk about the future of philanthropy, but I want to start in the past. Priscilla, we were talking backstage about your first memory and the impact that your childhood had on your journey, that it really led you to where you are today. Tell us a little bit about your childhood.
At the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, we're working on advancing human potential and promoting equal opportunities.
Sometimes we used to hear our parents say, we left our homeland so you could pursue your dreams as long as you're a lawyer, a doctor, or an engineer. And I didn't do it, and she did. So I know they're very proud of you.
I've always known that I wanted to work with children and invest in children because they just have so much potential. And I'm where I am today is because people invested in me. And so I ran an after-school program in college where I worked with a lot of kids, and that is incredibly important and personal for me. I am the child of Chinese Vietnamese refugees who came to this country with so little, and they really believed in the power of education and being able to bring my sisters and I a better opportunity. And early on, I just remember, like, as a family, we worked hard. And I felt an obligation to care for my grandparents, my sisters. My first memory is actually caring for my grandparents when my sister was at the hospital. And that sense of duty and caring, combined with the empowerment that my teachers and mentors gave me growing up, carried me all the way to Harvard, where I realized I was in a place of seemingly unlimited opportunity. And that was because I got lucky. I got lucky because people invested in me, and I needed to make sure that I worked hard to make sure that others, there's so many families and children that have incredible potential.